Good day, good people. My name is Gentleman Viking, and welcome to my review of the first episode of Star Trek Picard. Now, before we get started, I gotta tell you, I won't say a huge Trek fan, but I'm not a fanatic or a fanboy, but I have enjoyed Star Trek for almost all of my life. Back when I was a kid, about two or three, we had a lot of the Star Trek episodes on VHS tape, and many a times Dad would pop them on, and we'd sit and watch an episode of Star Trek or two around dinner. And it got to the point where I'd come home from school and I'd play those VHS tapes myself. So I was pretty much raised on Star Trek The Next Generation, so the fact that they're essentially making a quote-unquote sequel series to TNG, to say that ruffled my feathers. Sorry, that's the wrong analogy. To say it lifted my skirt, I believe, is a more apt analogy. That's an understatement. I was super excited for it when it first came out, despite my misgivings about Star Trek Discovery. I was really excited for a new series starring Patrick Stewart as Jean-Luc Picard. And I gotta say, this series, it's definitely piqued my interest. It hasn't left me ranting and raving, this is terrible, but nor has it made me think, oh wow, this is the best shit I've ever seen, I want more. This is more like you have my interest, now let's see if you can keep it. So, beware spoilers ahead. I will be giving essentially the entire plot of away, so if you don't want to hear that, you are welcome to click away from the video, but I will also be sharing my thoughts on particular scenes as this progresses, so if you have seen it, you can hear my thoughts strewn throughout the video. If you haven't, I really suggest you watch the episode first. With that said, let's start. So the episode starts off with shots of space, so stars, nebulas, clouds of swirling dust, and in the background we hear Blue Sky being played by Bing Crosby. Now if you're a big Star Trek fan, or at least if you've watched a lot of the older material, Blue Sky was a song that Data sang to Riker during his and Troy's wedding. So it's a bit of an homage to Star Trek Nemesis to start off with. We see the Enterprise D flying through space, and we zoom in on one of the bulkheads, and then it cuts to a scene broken scenes of Picard and Data playing poker, which, once again, if you've seen a lot of the older stuff, you'll know that Data was a big fan of poker, but we only ever saw Picard play with him once during the entire series. It was on the very last episode of TNG, where he sat down at the end of that episode and played poker with his senior staff. Now, Data is wearing the uniform from the movie era, or the Dominion War era, so it was overcoat, black from here down with grey, but then a undershirt or an underblazer was where the colour of his particular departments was represented. Now, I want to point out something that it irked me. Like, I couldn't ignore it, but at the same time, it's not that big of a deal. It seemed like Data's makeup was a bit inconsistent. In a few scenes, it almost looked like he had a very smooth face, just slightly rounded because of his age, as if he'd essentially just blown up a bit of a balloon in his face, but walked straight off the set of TNG. Other times, it was almost as if looking in the same spot, you could see wrinkles coming out of nowhere. It was a little bit jarring. But apart from that, anyway. So the game continues with a little bit of banter between Picard and Data. Picard trying to point out that Data has a tick, but it identifies that in fact he actually doesn't have a tick, and Data's like, oh, you've seen through my deception, now I don't know what to do, sort of thing. Picard offers, Data says, oh, I bet 50 tokens, and Picard's like, oh, that's all I've got left. But he starts to stall by offering Data some tea. Oh, would you like Would you like sugar? Would you like milk? And Data's like, why are you stalling, Captain? And Picard says, because I don't want the game to end. And I gotta admit, for a brief moment, I'm just like, ugh, God damn it. Here is a captain who has lost one of his closest friends and companions, and he's essentially saying in his own dreams, like, it's obvious this is a dream. He's saying in his own dream, I miss you, and I wish that I could have spent more time with you. It was a bit of an emotional moment, and it got me a bit in the ticker too. Yeah. Anyway, so right after he says that, both of them look almost sad that they know that this has got to end. Data wins the hand by throwing down 5 queens of hearts, which obviously is a statistical impossibility because there should only be 1 queen of heart in an entire deck, let alone 5. But anyway, he wins the hand. But Picard suddenly realizes that the Enterprise D... I can't remember if I said before, it was Enterprise D that they're on. They're actually in 10 forward. Picard realizes that the ship is orbiting Mars, and he starts to realize that something's wrong. Data disappears, and then we see Mars blow up. It shatters the windows, and it burns Picard briefly before he suddenly wakes up on Chateau Picard in Lavar, France, if you know your old canon. Excuse me. He opens up a window, and we see the vineyards of the chateau being tended to by a few people, and a few I don't know if they're being driven or they're automatic, but these floating tractors which are spraying pesticide or water onto the grapes. It was pretty cool. Anyway, so we cut to a night shot of Greater Boston in the neon. I could see a symbol that looked really familiar. I think it was a Ferengi symbol, but at the same time, it jumped into my mind it could have been Bajoran or Cardassian. But that's probably because of I saw a lot of those symbols in Star Trek DS9. I think it was Ferengi, probably like a Ferengi casino or nightclub. Anyway, so we're introduced to Mysterious Girl and her alien boyfriend, an alien called a Zahian. Mysterious Girl is named Daj, so I'll be calling her Daj. I wrote down these notes before her name was actually introduced, so I didn't know her name was going to be introduced straight afterwards. But anyway, I'll be back. Anyway, so Daj has been accepted into the Daystrom Institute, which, once again, if you've watched Star Trek lore, it's essentially kind of like the Harvard of the Star Trek of Earth in the Federation. It's where a lot of the greatest scientific minds or great scientists study or bring forth new concepts, new ideas. And she got introduced for for work in artificial intelligence and quantum consciousness, which weirds me out, but I'll get to that in a minute. Anyway, so 3 assassins just randomly beam in to her apartment. They kill her boyfriend to death by stabbing him through the chest with a knife. And then they start scanning Daj's brain with some things they put on the side. One of the assassins starts speaking in alien, but he says no, he gets told to speak in English. And the assassins start asking really vague questions, such as, where's the rest of you? Where are you from? Which... why do they always have to ask such random and silly questions? Anyway. So the assassins put a bag over Daj's head, and suddenly she starts becoming very calm, and she kills them all to death. She beats them up, shoots them, stabs them, and yeah, all 3 assassins are now dead. She takes off the bag, realizes what she done, and then she starts freaking out. She goes and checks to see if her boyfriend's fine. He's dead. He's bleeding all across the carpet. And then she suddenly sees a vision of Picard. And then the intro starts. The credits crawl. Now, even if I end up saying absolutely nothing good about this episode, I can tell you the music is amazing. I'm gonna have to check to see who did it for my next video, but you, sir, did a great job. You captured a lot of the spirit of TNG in your intro music, even with a few little musical homages to TNG. Good job. Anyway, so when the intro cinematic closes, we see Picard walking around the vineyard with his dog, who, by the way, he called Number One. And we're introduced to Laris and Jaban, who look like they're Romulan refugees from the Hobus star explosion. And they're talking about how it's going to be a big day for Picard. And essentially it's an interview. It marks, I think, a 10-year anniversary or something since the Romulan star exploded. And it's Picard's first public interview since that time. And we get told that the interviewer, who is going to be, or the journalist who's going to be interviewing Picard, was told specifically 3 times, don't mention his separation from Starfleet. And she said all 3 times, yeah, sure, I won't mention it. And as soon as I heard that, I'm thinking to myself, yeah, no, she's a journalist. She is going to poke and prod at all of the squishy bits, for better or for worse. Anyway, so Laris and Jaban, they're trying to comfort Picard, trying to encourage him, and Jaban says to him, be the captain that we remember. It's a shot from one of the trailers. And I gotta admit, once again, I was hit with a bit of an emotional thing, because this is the first time in a good 20 or so years that we've seen Captain Picard, or at least now he's known Admiral Picard, retired. So, yeah. Anyway, so the interview is pretty exposition heavy. We learn that the star around Romulus was going to go supernova, although in some other parts of canon it's another star that went supernova which caused the Romulan star to go supernova. Anyway. And they actually asked the Federation for help, despite the Romulans and the Federation being enemies. Being enemies for a good 100 or so years. And Picard encouraged the rescue effort. He said, right, we owe it to them. It is our obligation as humanitarians to help out those who are in need. And then we find that in this exposition dump, there was meant to be a fleet of 100,000 ships, which Picard left the Enterprise to command this fleet in an effort to rescue over 900 million Romulan citizens and civilians from Romulus. Now, the journalist is a bit of a dick in this. Like, calm your farm, sweetheart. She's like, oh, but you were saving Romulan lives. Picard's like, we were saving lives. We had an obligation to them. Oh, but they're our enemies. It doesn't matter. They needed help. We have to provide it if they're asked. Which, yes, does speak back to the very heavy moralist viewpoint of the Federation from TNG. If they got a distress call, they would go and help regardless of the situation or the consequences, and then deal with the consequences later. Which, yeah, in a lot of episodes, it got them in trouble, but, better to be the good guy and do a wrong thing than be the bad guy and do the wrong thing, I guess. Yeah, so the interviewer starts saying, it was an undertaking of logistical scale like the pyramids. And Picard fires back, well, the pyramids were just a big vanity project. If we were to compare this to a historical thing, it was more like Dunkirk. I'll admit, I'm not really up on my modern history. I don't know the whole story of Dunkirk, but I'm pretty sure that it was something to do with a big humanitarian effort to do with civilians and civilians helping out the military. Anyway. And then suddenly they take this sharp turn in this exposition dump to something completely of left field, which has really nothing to do with this Romulan rescue mission, which, if it wasn't for the fact that this, if I was actually watching this on a news broadcast, I would probably be, and it was a big hero like Picard, I would probably be ringing up the news people the next day saying, what the hell was that? That had nothing to do with what you were originally interviewing him for, WTF. Anyway, so we find out that while this big rescue mission was being undertaken, synthetic persons managed to get control of Mars's defense grid, blew up almost the rest of the Federation fleet that was hanging around Sector 001, the Sol system, blew up half the fleet, turned the defense systems onto Mars, ignited the atmosphere, and essentially Mars is now a ball of fire, and quote-unquote on fire to this day. And once again, I'm thinking to myself, what the hell does that have to do with a Romulan supernova? It's almost as if you're blaming Picard for the fact that this happened, which it could tie into something that we find out happened around that time in a future episode, like maybe Picard did have an involvement in it. But then the journalist starts grilling Picard on Data. Oh, well, what about Lieutenant Commander Data? He was a synthetic. He's like, yes, he was. Or did you ever lose faith in him? He's like, no, I didn't. Pretty much just throwing it back in this bitch's face. And then she's like, oh, well, does this have anything to do with why you left Starfleet? And then Picard is like, oh, because it wasn't my Starfleet. They turned around and they abandoned the Romulans, they refused to help them, and they let a bunch of them die. That essentially made us the bad guys. And then Picard starts to berate the interviewer, saying, oh, you don't even know what Dunkirk is, you don't know your history, you don't know what war is like, and for those people that it leaves behind. And then pretty much says this interview's over and walks off. And while that last bit is happening, we see Daj watching the interview from from a TV screen inside a window. Bit cliche, but oh well. And she starts having more visions of, yeah, you gotta go see Picard. Then we see Picard sitting at his chateau again with his dog number one. The dog gets up, starts running off, and starts barking at someone. And it's Daj. She arrives and pretty much just starts saying, do you know who I am? And I'm like, you just met the guy. What makes, I know you've been through a lot, sweetheart, but still, you're acting like you're like the attack happened a few hours ago. An hour ago. You haven't had like a day to try and calm your farm, think things through. But anyway, Picard is like, oh, what's wrong? Let me help you. And Daj starts telling her story of the assassins, and she suddenly kills them. It was like lightning was trying to flow through my body and into the ground. And then says that she had visions of Picard and knew that she would feel safe around him. And then we see Picard sitting with Daj at the chateau. Laris and Jaban bring out some tea and a blanket for her. And sure enough, yeah, Picard is like, oh, it's Earl Grey, it fixes everything. I just had to laugh at that. But then he randomly takes an interest in Daj's necklace. And it's a very simple necklace. All it is just two interlocking rings like that. Ignore the fingers, just two interlocking rings and the rest of the necklace. There's nothing special about this necklace. I don't know why Picard suddenly says, oh yes, that's an interesting necklace, let me have a look at it. I mean, the girl's just gone through trauma. Why are you asking about a necklace? And, Picard, after that little tangent, Daj starts saying that, oh yeah, I don't just know you from the interviews and from your lectures. I know you deeply. I sense that I know you from a very long time ago. And Picard's like, oh, actually, yeah, I think you're right. I think you do know me deeply. And then Laris shows Daj to a room, and then she leaves the necklace on the table, despite saying that her dad made it for her, or something like that. Or we find out that her dad made it for her. So you'd think a keepsake, she'd keep that on hand at all times, but no, she just leaves it on the table. That necklace is essentially a MacGuffin. It's a MacGuffin, plain and simple. And look, I gotta be honest, I expected a little better from Star Trek. Normally the MacGuffin is like this big, to quote the Critical Drinker, magical bullshit science gadget MacGuffin thing. Sorry, I know that I just butchered your accent there. You got a much thicker accent than that. But anyway, this is essentially a magical bullshit necklace. Picard wakes up. We see Picard wake up again. We see him do that a lot. Are they really trying to tell us that Picard is an old man? We see him wake up about 4 times in this episode. He wakes up, looks out the window, and he sees Data under a tree painting a portrait. Now this time, the uniforms are from the TNG era. Both Data and Picard are wearing one now. Picard walks up to him. Data's halfway through painting what looks like this woman in a white robe standing next to a shoreline with waves. He notices Picard turns around, tries to hand in the paintbrush and says, "Oh, would you like to finish it, Captain?" And Captain Picard's like, "I don't know how." And Data says, "I don't think that's the case, sir." And then just as Picard's starting to take the brush, he wakes up and he's in his office. Laris comes in and says, "Oh, Daj is missing." No, wait, sorry, cut back a minute. Picard wakes up, turns around, and sees the painting. It's finished, but there's no face on the woman. And Picard's like, "Oh, that's it." Has a bit of a eureka moment. And Laris comes in and says, "Oh, Daj is missing. We can't see her on the feeds. She's left the chateau." And Picard's like, "Oh, crap. Well, I've got to attend to something. Let me know if she comes back." And then leaves and goes to Starfleet Archives at San Francisco. So, it's like 4 places we've been to so far. Anyway. Seems to be a lot of jumping and cutting. Not that I'm complaining, but just pointing it out. One cool thing, though, I saw, and I saw this in Altered Carbon as well. The San Francisco Bridge is now just lined with solar panels. I just found that funny. I think we've seen that in Star Trek before, but I can't be sure. Maybe from the new Kelvin timeline movies. It's been a while since I've seen them. Anyway, so Picard is now in the Starfleet Quantum Archives, whatever that means. And he's talking to this hologram, saying that, "Oh yeah, she's saying, "Oh yeah, the archives are quantum locked. No one can get in without your say-so. Oh, maybe we should start charging tickets." And Picard's like, "Oh, is that a sense of humor? We're trying something new. Don't quit your day job." I found that a little bit humorous. But at the same time, that also... I forgot to mention something. So... this has gone back further in the episode. During the interview with Picard and the bitch, bitch says, "Oh yeah, after that attack on Mars, they banned all synthetic life." So I'm thinking, okay, so that would mean androids, which means that they had androids to begin with. Even though later in the episode they pretty much said, "Yeah, we can't recreate Data's positronic net." So they must have done a really shitty job of programming these androids. But I was thinking to myself, wait, what about the Doctor from Star Trek Voyager? And we know he's canon, especially because 7 of 9 is in this TV series. It's in the trailers. But what about the Doctor? He's a hologram, but he is essentially synthetic life. He's sentient. He was even accorded the rights of an artist under Federation law, so he could control his own creative works. Does that mean he suddenly has to get decommissioned? Like, what happened to him? I'm suddenly thinking, wait, what happened to this random character who we'll probably never hear anything from? But I'm like, wait, what happened to him? Did he have to go into exile or something? What about all of the holograms the Mark 1 EMHs who are working on dilithium waste extraction things? Anyway. But yeah, like I can understand it androids, but does that count holograms as well? Sorry, the fact that this index was a hologram reminded me of that. So we go into Picard's personal archive inside the Starfleet archives, and it's essentially like a walk-in vault for him. So, I mean, Picard must have had a lot of clout in order to get his own room inside an archive. And it is just a trove of relics and fan service. We see a Klingon Daktar and a Batleth. I'm thinking maybe they were given to him by Worf, or from when he was the part of when he was Worf's Shadich. No, he was given a ceremonial knife, but I don't think he was giving a Daktar. I'd have to check that. We see certificates on the wall, a few medals, and we also see models of Picard's first commanding ship, the Stargazer, the Enterprise E, and even the captain's yacht, which we saw in Star Trek Insurrection. We also even see, right in the background, the Kurlan artifact that was given to him in, I think it was an episode called The Chase, season 6 or 7. It's like this clay pot or clay statue, this little figurine, and you open it up and there's a bunch of little figurines inside. We see that in the background too. I thought that was pretty cool. We even see the banner for Picard Day, where on the Enterprise D, all the kids were making little figurines and drawings and statues of Picard, and how much for how much they appreciated all he does to keep the ship safe. And Picard gets teleported to the archive, this other painting which Data did, and he asks Index, the hologram, for information on the painting, and she's like, oh, it's oil on canvas. It was painted circa 2369 by Lieutenant Commander Data. It was a set of 2, both were gifted to you, and the other one, I believe the other one is hanging in your office. And I thought, it's weird that you know that. And they do a zoom in on the painting, and instead of the woman being faceless like the one in Picard's office, this painting has Dahj's face on it, which immediately is going back again to the beginning of the episode when Dahj is first attacked by the assassins. They say, oh, she hasn't woken up yet, or she hasn't been activated yet. I'm thinking, okay, she's either a sleeper agent or she's an android. Picard is suddenly shocked by this revelation, and we see in the next scene Dahj at night walking around Paris. She's on the streets. She hunkers down and she calls up her mom on like this little holophone thing that comes out of her wrist. It's like, it reminds me of the Omni tool from Mass Effect. So like hard light touchscreen or something. Mom comes up on a holographic image. And Dahj says to her mom, these people are trying to kill me. I don't know where I'm going to be safe. Please, Mom, help me. And Mom is like, oh, don't worry, just go back to staying with Picard. You'll be fine. And Dahj's like, wait, I never told you about Picard. And then we see a static image on the phone. I'm thinking, okay, the mom's a holographic image, or it's, you're an artificial intelligence or something. It's suddenly having to reprogram itself, come up with a new variable. And Mom is like, oh, you told me before. No, I didn't. So, don't worry, you'll be safe with Picard. Oh, I don't even know where he is. Oh, just dig deep, think of Picard, and find Picard. And then suddenly she's like, boink! And then starts scanning through her Omni tool. I'm just going to call it an Omni tool. Scanning through her Omni tool, she hacks into Starfleet security. She geolocates Picard. And I'm like, fucking hell, what the hell is all this bullshit? You just hacked into Starfleet security and no one's none the wiser? Even their, like, basic computers would be like, hey, security alert. Anyway. Then she just shows up at the Starfleet archives as Picard is leaving. And she's like, oh, I didn't feel I didn't want to be there because I thought that you wouldn't be safe, and I think I'm crazy. I can hear a conversation a block away. I hacked into this thing. How do I do that? What is all this? She's going a little. Ah. Picard sits her down, and he starts very slowly explaining about Data, how he was an android, but not like the synthetics that attacked Mars. He says that attack left such a bad image in people's minds, but Data was so much more than that, so much better than that. And he starts explaining to Daj about how he sacrificed himself to save Picard's life. Um, um, how much of a good man he was, his sacrifice, and then he also starts to explain about the painting, which, funnily enough, was called Daughter, and he's essentially, without saying it, saying to Daj, "You're a synthetic, you're an android," and Daj is like, "No, I can't be. I have this memory of my dad. He was an exobiologist. Our house was filled with orchids. He bred these two orchids, and he named one after me." And Picard is like, "That's a wonderful memory, and it's yours, and no one can take that away from you." But he starts saying, "But you have to think of the possibility. Just look deep inside yourself." And says to her, "If you are who I think you are, then you are someone who's very dear to me. If you are Data's daughter, or the daughter of someone that I know, then that means we share a profound bond, and you mean more to me than anything, and I'm never gonna leave you." Bit Mary Sue-ish in a way, but oh well. Then suddenly, Daj just randomly says, "Oh no, they're here, we gotta run." And I'm like, "How do you know?" Like, did you get a call up on your magical bullshit Android sensors? Anyway, so they start running, and I noticed that they actually had to use a stunt double for Picard, for Patrick Stewart while they were running, because the guy's 80, he can barely run up a flight of stairs. They make it to the roof of this building, and all these assassins just start beaming in, like one after the other, groups of two. Daj starts kicking the crap out of them. Picard is taking cover, watching all this happen. A assassin randomly like beams up on the top of these steps on the other side of this roof, starts shooting at Daj, only aiming for her feet for some reason. I'm like, come on guys, seriously? You could edit just a few shots flying past her to look at like she's dodging them. Anyway, Daj jumps up like 3 flights of stairs, like a good 20 meters upwards towards these steps. She starts beating the shit out of more of these assassins. She knocks off the helmet of one of them, who tumbles down the stairs. Picard sees that it's a Romulan, and we're like, oh, the plot thickens. And then one of them gets knocked down to the ground. Daj is about to shoot him with a phaser rifle or a disruptor rifle, whatever it is. It's red instead of green, which is also weird. Romulan technology is green. And then the Romulan that Daj knocked down randomly just spits this green acid at her, and it starts melting her skin, it melts the gun, it melts the guy's chin. I'm thinking, what the fuck is going on here? Since when did Romulans turn into toads? Anyway, so, Daj starts screaming, the gun goes off and explodes, and it takes Daj with it. So Daj is dead. Fuck. I gotta admit, I was not expecting that. I was expecting this character to be like a BS Mary Sue who Picard is gonna follow to the ends of the galaxy to try and figure out what was going on. Simply because he believes she's Data's daughter. But no, they kill her. I was really shocked. Picard gets knocked back about 10 meters or so in this explosion. That's a big explosion for a phaser rifle, but anyway. No, I guess. Nah, it's a big enough boom. But he doesn't wake up in a hospital. He just wakes up in the chateau. And I'm like, this guy is a retired Starfleet admiral. whether he's retired or not, whether he's in disgrace or not, this is a guy you rush to the hospital and give him, like, A++ treatment. Like, what? He just randomly wakes up back in his French villa again. Yeah, so, the two Romulans are over him. They're comforting him, tending to his wound, or not his wounds. He doesn't have any wounds. He's fine. Um, Picard starts wallowing in his own pity, saying, "Oh, I've been wallowing around all these years, writing history books that no one's ever gonna read, pretty much just waiting to die." And I'm like, "Fuck, man! Seriously, Picard?" But, hopefully the reasons why will become more apparent. Be back in a tick. So I actually record all of these on my phone. So whenever my hard drive space on my phone gets full, I have to remove the video that I just recorded onto my computer so I can edit it all together later. Anyway, so Picard wakes up in the chateau. He's fine. He starts wallowing. "Oh, I've been waiting all these years to die." But then now it's suddenly like he has something to believe in, something to live for, to investigate. And he wants to know essentially who Dahj was and why she was and all that stuff. So he heads to the Daystrom Institute, which is also pretty interesting considering that Dahj was meant to get a job or a place there. But he doesn't mention that, which is weird. Or if he does, it was just in passing. No, I don't even think he mentions it to anyone. Anyway, so he meets random scientist lady whose name I didn't bother to write down. And she's pretty much like, "Oh, Admiral Picard, how can I help you?" And he's like, "Is it possible to create synthetic people who are essentially human beings out of flesh and blood?" And she's like, starts laughing in his face. I'm not going to do a laugh, but starts laughing in his face like, "No, seriously, what are you doing here?" "Oh, you were serious." So it turns out this scientist is worked on a lot of synthetic people before the ban on that field of research. And she also says that the synthetics that destroyed Mars came from that lab, so I'm thinking, why were you guys not shut down completely? She says all they can do now is do computer models, basic research. They can't actually build anything in the physical world. It's all virtual. And, Picard starts lamenting that a little bit. "Oh, the ban shouldn't have happened," things like that. Scientist lady opens up a drawer, and B4 is inside. And, is where we're getting into a lot of expositional techno-babble. I didn't really bother to write all of it down, but essentially... And so in Star Trek Nemesis, Data tried to copy his brain into B4, an experimental prototype android that was built before Data, so it didn't have Data's brain capacity. But he tried to download that data anyway. The scientist lady says, "Oh yeah, it didn't hold. No one could," and after Data died, everything was such a hassle. No one could replicate the science behind it. Everything was in a bit of a shambles. But no, you can't create synthetic life because you would need to have the scan of Data's positronic brain to do that, which we don't have. She name drops Bruce Maddox, who was in original TNG, he was a scientist who wanted to recreate Data by essentially taking him apart to see what worked, but he couldn't guarantee that Data would actually come out of that procedure alive. So everyone was like hell you're doing that. But he still tried to work on creating synthetic life. Maddox comes into the Daystrom Institute after the ban, and then things start taking ahead. But after the synthetic ban, or the ban on synthetic research, and apparently it's galaxy-wide, so I'm thinking, like, the leftover Romulans, the Klingons, the Cardassians, the Ferengi, all of them suddenly decided to stop their own work on synthetic people and artificial intelligence because of this attack on Mars. Very Geth, Quarian sort of thing. It reminds me of it. Anyway. And then Picard's still talking to the scientist lady, just randomly gets out Daja's necklace. And she's like, "Oh my god, I wish you had to come in on my day off. Where'd you get that?" "Oh, it's from from that person who I believe is a synthetic flesh and blood person." She's like, "Oh, crap. Oh, it's the symbol for fractal neuronic cloning." Or neutronic cloning. Neuronic cloning. So, yeah, once again, it's a lot of expositional technobabble. Maddox came up with a theory that even if you just had a single neuron of Data's positronic brain, you would be able to not recreate the whole positronic brain, but you'd essentially be able to copy and paste that into a synthetic brain to make it more human and more lifelike. Which, yeah, once again, how? Why? And then, so yeah, essentially you'd be able to create a full synthetic human. And the scientist lady also just randomly drops that it would, oh yeah, any such procedure would always produce twins. And I'm like, how? Why? That is so, like... I don't want to say bad writing, but it's like they wanted to kill Daj in the first episode to give Picard something to investigate, but they also needed him to investigate something more profound. So they're just like, oh yeah, the procedure makes two of them. Like, it's just this half-hearted bullshit plot device. Oh yeah, you can create Data's essence from a single neuron of his brain, but it always produces twins. Anyway, so then we cut to this random Romulan ship. He pulls into a hangar. It's festooned with Romulan imagery, the symbol of the old empire. And this ominous-looking Romulan gets off. I'm thinking he's some sort of security agent because of all of the big bassy music, the ominous music. He's walking very confidently. And then he walks up and he starts talking to this lady named Soji Asha. And then they reveal that that's Daja's sister. And she even says, she's even got the same necklace and says, oh yeah, my dad gave it to me, my sister has one just like it, it's my twin sister. And then, ominous Romulan, he's acting all nervous like, he's acting like he's all shy and all, saying, oh yeah, I had a brother, we lost him a couple of years ago. Oh, but you don't want to hear that, you always deal with broken people. And she's like, oh, I'll talk you through it. And then that's essentially where the episode ends, except we zoom out into the Romulan hangar bay, we zoom down and out, and then we realize we're on a fucking Borg cube! That got me excited. I'm like, oh shit, the Borg! The Borg used to terrify me as a kid, namely Star Trek First Contact. When you're 6 years old, wait, it came out in 95. Yeah, when you're 5 or 6 years old, that shit is terrifying. And considering they used a lot of practical makeup and effects for that movie, oh man, those things just terrified the crap out of me. I couldn't even watch half of Star Trek Voyager, the episodes that involved the Borg, because I was just terrified of the Borg when I was a kid. Now I'm fine, obviously. But yeah, that got me really excited. We know the Borg are going to play a heavy part in this series. We've seen shots of 7, of 9, Q Borg. Yeah, so I'm thinking maybe it was Maddox, through a mixture of Data's positronic brain and Borg technology and the research done at the Daystrom Institute, he's managed to create a few, fully synthetic humans that he's programmed, even with false memories. Um, they never drop. They never actually. That's a bit of a like. Earlier on in the episode, when they're talking about the painting, or the painting is called Daughter, and Picard says that Daj might be Data's daughter, and like, oh yeah, he always wanted a daughter, and I'm like, he didn't always want a daughter, but he did have a daughter at one point. Anyway, yeah, that was just something. So there's a lot of okay, hang on, let me just okay. I liked what I saw. There were a few reports going around saying that Patrick Stewart was going to try and shovel in his own politics into this series. I don't see that yet. And if it is, it's being very subtle about it. But at the same time, if you think about it in the grand scheme of the older canon, it kinda makes sense. So, the last 3 or 4 seasons of DS9 involved the Dominion War. Hundreds, if not thousands, of starships were lost, millions were dead. Almost half of the Federation was just annexed by the Dominion. It was only through sheer luck they managed to defeat them. Luck and a bit of bribery, but anyway. Then you had the attack by the Borg. The Sonar insurrection wasn't really anything too big. But then you also had, what's his name? Shinzon of Remus, who was Picard's clone in Star Trek Nemesis. He attacked the Romulan Senate and the Empire. He was trying to essentially wipe out all life on Earth using another magical bullshit MacGuffin. So if you think about it, in that span of, let's say 10 years, 5 or 10 years, the Federation did manage to go through a lot of political and territorial, economic trauma. They're being attacked pretty much every other year by some hostile species or another. And even if this was about 5 years or so before the big Romulus incident, the supernova, it wouldn't surprise me if a couple of the big politicians were just like, no, we gotta look after numero uno. We can't expend all these resources to rescue an enemy, even if they have us for help. So, I can see it from Picard's point of view, especially because of his relationship with Spock and the unification of Romulus and Vulcan. He believes that morally it was a right thing to do. We should have done it, but we didn't. That makes us the bad guys. So he quit Starfleet. But then on the other side of the coin, you're the Federation president. The Federation is essentially not a shadow, but it's been beaten. It's been beaten a few times. It's well below its former glory. You've got very, not say little resources, but you're spread thin. And then suddenly, one of your worst and oldest enemies is asking for you for help. Should I really give that help, even though it is a humanitarian matter? I can see it from both sides, that's what I'm saying. But yeah, at the same time, I think it was coming off a little bit too heavy-handedly. Like, that bitch of an interviewer essentially interrupting Picard, almost accusing him of aiding and comforting an enemy, which kind of was, but at the same time, it's a humanitarian issue. Grilling him about Data and then going into like the random bullshit of the Mars being blown up, which, I mean, as I was saying before, how does rescuing Romulans, and even Picard says this, he's like, I thought we were talking about the Romulan supernova. What is this? What does synthetics attacking Mars have to do with that? I'm sure in a few episodes we're going to see some sort of causal relationship between the Mars attack and Romulus blowing up, but who knows. As I said at the start of the episode, I want to see more. I would like to see where this is going. I'm going to watch this with my family, and I'm going to be watching it. Yeah. If you're a fan of Picard, I would recommend going in with an open mind. Even if you are a die-hard Trekkie, just remember, look, this is a new production company. They aren't going to do everything that you want them to just simply because you're a fan, as much as I don't want to say that. I'm happy with what I've got so far, but I think I'll be going into each episode with a bit of trepidation. They've got a lot to prove. Anyway, so that was my thoughts. This video has probably run collectively for like 45 minutes or something, so I thank you very much for sticking through this and listening to me ramble all this time. If you like what you hear, please like and share and subscribe. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, so you can listen to my next rant and review of Picard. And let me know in the comments below what you thought of Picard. Did you like it? Did you hate it? I'd be happy to have a civilized discussion with you. We'll put on a cup of Earl Grey tea and some Romulan ale, and we'll go from there. Anyway, this is Gentleman Viking signing out. Live long and prosper, and I'll see you next time. Ta-ra!